Welcome to Food Travel Talk TV, a monthly talk show brought to you by the World Food Travel Association, the world's leading authority on food and beverage tourism. Food Travel Talk TV was created by and for the world's culinary travel trade. Our goal with the show is to inspire us all with ways to help us do business better. Every month, we invite industry thought leaders, opinion makers, and trendsetters to discuss important topics for our industry's benefit. My name is Eric Wolf, and I'll be your host today for our March 2021 episode number 12. This month's topic is, What's New with Wineries and Sustainability? And I'd like to introduce our guests. Pavs Pillay, Environmental Behavior Change Practitioner with WWF South Africa, and Shelly Fuller, Program Manager in Sustainable Fruit and Wine Projects, WWF South Africa. Feel free to post your questions at any time in the chat window. We will reserve the last 20 minutes or so for our guests to answer your questions. Now I'd like to set the tone for today's episode. Our world and our industry had already been heading full steam ahead towards increased sustainability in all we do, with particular attention to the triple bottom line, or people, planet, and profit. However, the COVID pandemic has put the spotlight on everything we do as both consumers and business people, and has forced us all to reconsider our own sustainability practices and policies. According to our Food Travel Monitor research, winery visits are one of the most popular activities that food and beverage lovers enjoy while traveling. It stands to reason then that wineries could and should play an important role in driving even greater awareness of sustainability in our industry. However, for us at the World Food Travel Association, sustainability extends well beyond environmental concerns and includes sociocultural and economic issues as well. Joining us today are two experienced staff members who work in South Africa for WWF, or the Worldwide Fund for Nature. Their work with WWF enables Pavs and Shelly to collaborate closely with Vinpro, a nonprofit company which represents 2,500 South African wine producers, sellers, and industry stakeholders. We'll talk with them about what sustainability means to wineries and wine tourism, and how they help wineries to be better corporate citizens by proactively communicating their sustainable policies and practices to their customers and visitors.
Systems is continually enhanced.
Okay.
And sorry, to answer your question, we're the only WWF office that has this partnership in place. We would love to expand beyond our borders to export it. It's really about setting up the partnership, though, and I think we couldn't do this without the support of the wine industry and without the wine farmers themselves. It's a voluntary program. We as WWF take on the role of financing it and sourcing funding, because we believe that the investment should be focused on the farms and in the cellars, where we're trying to change their practices to be more regenerative and sustainable.
Okay. Pavs, you look like you want to add to that.
No. I just obviously agree with Shelly. People very often, when we talk about what our program, which is the WWF Conservation Champions Program, they confuse it with exactly that label on the neck. And these are two separate programs that actually enhance and kind of live off each other. And they push the industry to do better when it comes to sustainability. And I think that's the key point, is that we're at the situation now that sustainability can't be something that we have to think about in the future. It has to happen now. And these farms are doing exactly that. They're kind of pushing the envelope around what they can conduct on their farms in terms of producing a really great product that is well known, exported all around the world, is in demand, but at the same time not leaving the environmental and the social kind of safeguards behind, because we need those to ensure the longevity of the industry in total. So, whenever we talk to people, we kind of say, yes, it's great to look for the little icon on the neck, but please look for the little sugar bird on the protea as well. Then you're getting the best of both, and slowly we'll get people to recognize both those logos.
Nice. So I want to do a very quick housekeeping item here. Apologies to everyone watching. I needed to click another button to start broadcasting live. So, oops. Really sorry, everybody. I know, new platform. We're all figuring out how this works. But we've been having a great conversation for the past 20 minutes. But for people for the benefit of everyone who just joined, I'm not going to go through the introductions or anything like that again. But I think one of the most important questions, if we could just really repeat very quickly, Shelly, is why is an NGO working with the wine industry in South Africa? And can you just give the top level again, really quick, and we'll get back up to speed?
Okay, great. So WWF South Africa, as the Worldwide Fund for Nature, have been working with the wine industry in South Africa for 15 plus years. Because South African wine is produced in an area that is also of conservation value. So we needed to make sure that the sustainability of the South African wine industry was based on strong environmental stewardship. So making sure that the producers are looking after their natural areas, are making sure the water streams are cleared so that the industry can continue to grow. And now we're building on kind of the foundation of best practice at the farm level to try and tip that into the consumer space. So make sure that the market understands what this means and what this partnership is about. And so then they look for the logos and they understand what they mean, and they can support the farms that really are environmental leaders in the South African industry.
Mm. And then you were saying that one of the values that you add to the industry there is the certification programs that you've developed, and working in tandem with the industry to create things like the logos that you showed on the wine bottle. And I'm not sure that logo, that the first one you showed, I don't think we were broadcasting then. Could you show that again?
Sure. Handy bottle of wine close by. So this is the integrated production of wine seal. It's on 90% of the wine bottles exported out of South Africa, and it's called Integrity and Sustainability Certified. It is the environmental standard of South African wine production. And as mentioned before, we've been involved with the biodiversity elements and making sure that standard has credibility. Mm-hmm. But we also require our conservation champions, who are accredited with an additional logo, the Sugarbird and Protea logo, because these are the leaders. So they're not only signing up and being certified as environmentally safe and friendly, they're also committing to exceptional energy savings, water stewardship, and nature conservation. So we sign a contract with them. We sign a legal agreement with these 45 farms that are recognized as environmental leaders. And they've committed, because their area is really where a lot of the water security is coming from for South Africa, for the industries downstream. So we find it important to be able to make sure they understand their commitments and that we can recognize their commitments in the market.
So those logos that were developed and that are on the wine bottles, were those developed for the export market, for domestic, both? Makes no difference?
Both. We'd like to see those logos everywhere. Our conservation champion program is open to any application. We do hold quite strict criteria in terms of how you can be part of the program. But as mentioned, it is a voluntary program, and we support and try and incentivize those environmental leaders to make sure that they're able to achieve what they want, setting out to achieve. So, yeah, it's basically on any product, and it is a Sugarbird and Protea logo because that's iconic to the Cape Floral Kingdom here in the Western Cape. So it's kind of a symbol of the conservation that they are part of.
For those who don't know, Protea is a type of flower, very pretty flower.
Thank you.
I didn't know what one was until I think it was either in Australia or New Zealand, and then I heard the name. Obviously, I learned what it was. So
great, yeah.
Indeed. Now, do you have any metrics about the wine estates that have started to use these labels? Are they selling more? Do they have higher ratings from consumers? Anything like that that shows the success of this mark?
I would love to be able to answer that clearly and neatly. But unfortunately, I mean, we've started now, as Pavs introduced earlier, really trying to shift the behavior. And a stepping stone in that is understanding what the market knows in terms of all these different labels. So we've done a consumer survey locally, but I think what's critical is the international space. I mean, a large portion of South African wine is exported to the countries that are listening on this call. So if those international markets are also not understanding what the logo means, then the endorsement is not as meaningful. So, and I think that's what I really wanted to get across in this discussion tonight, is just really to say that's really where sustainability needs to move, is there's a proliferation of eco labels out there, and consumers, although well-intentioned, they want to buy consciously and they want to support those that are farming sustainably. It's a misunderstanding as to what all those stickers are on many of the products. So I think we're doing our best to try and get an understanding of who is using and who is understanding the labels locally, and we'd love to work with partners to expand that internationally. But also what's missing is the market endorsement. So would a consumer pay more if they saw those logos and knew that they were supporting nature conservation, for example? And trends have shown that although they like the idea of buying, if it comes to the final decision, it's price driven. So I think we're still got a long way to be able to shift that.
Yeah. So that's where my work fits right in, and is in trying to move the South African consumer and hopefully the international consumers away from just choosing it because of taste and price, but actually to look at those drivers such as sustainability and sustainable production as one of those key attributes you would then put in your little box of tricks when you're choosing a specific wine, or from a specific wine estate, because the estate would get the little seal. The interesting thing in some of the market analysis work that we've done in South Africa is that with the South African consumers, we've immediately seen that quality and price are the two biggest criteria. Sustainability didn't even surface in the first 5, which is a big problem when you're trying to shift the market to choose a wine that's based on its production. The interesting thing in that analysis that we did is there's a niche group of South Africans that actually do consider sustainability, but there's this massive and kind of behavioral science which we call the awareness action gap. They're aware, but they're not willing to act on it. And I think that's a similar experience with international markets, is that they're aware, but they're not willing to necessarily act on that awareness. And that's the bridge that we're trying desperately with the behavior work to kind of get over. And how do we shift that awareness into action? And that comes with, endorsement, particularly where I see one of the important things that the South African is with our retailers. If a retailer starts saying, I am stocking a wine that is produced sustainability a priority, giving it prime shelf space, consumers start recognizing that a lot of South Africans, if not all South Africans, purchase wine at a retailer. They don't necessarily go to boutique wine shops, or if they do, they'd go to a farm. But most of us would purchase it from a regular retailer. And I think there's the one chance where we can actually use the retailer as leverage to kind of get the South African consumer to go, why is this shelf so special? What is special about these wines? And then for that message to be communicated. But it's almost a bonus for the retailer to say, hey, look at what we're doing. We're fantastic. We're supporting farms that are producing wine that's sustainable. We're supporting the environment. So it's a win-win. And I think we just have to get that kind of balance right. And then we'll definitely get more recognition on both the logo, but also in terms of getting the consumer to start thinking about it. I know Shelly's working really hard with FinPro and WOSA, etc., to see how we can do that with the international market when we export wine. How do we get the international consumer? Because they're already asking that question. The South African consumer is lagging slightly, and the international consumer is already asking questions around sustainability. And what we want them now is to start recognizing the logo and then choosing that bottle of wine and knowing that it comes from a champion's farm.
When did this program launch, and when did these logos start appearing on wine bottles?
So the previous name of the Conservation Champions program was called the Biodiversity in Wine Initiative, and that was started in 2005 in the partnership between the wine industry and our NGO. And pretty much along the same lines, probably about 5 years before that, the integrated production of wine was established, so the certification scheme. And there was a target set for the whole of the industry to be using that seal on the neck of the bottle by 2020. And so we're almost there, 90-odd% using it. So, yeah, it's been around for a number of years. I just think there's a missed opportunity potentially that we're trying to support now in terms of communicating that. So what makes it unique? What does it mean? And how can you support? And that's really what opportunities like this are fabulous for. So thank you, Eric, again, for inviting us on to the show.
Well, this is quite interesting because I buy a lot of wine, and I don't buy that many South African wines. I have other tastes, but I do pay attention. So I am aware of the South African wines that are for sale, and I have never seen this logo. So I think that what I'd like to now shift the conversation a little bit back, and maybe Pavs, this is where you talk more about the consumer side of things. So the work you're doing, you're working with the wineries, they're getting it, they're putting the logos on the bottles. It's now on 90% of the. Did you say 90%, Shelly, of the bottles?
Nick.
Okay, so that's excellent penetration. Industry has adopted this. Wines of South Africa, WOSA, or Vinpro, they're behind you, and this is working. But consumers are either not seeing it or not knowing what they're seeing when they see that pretty little thing on the back. So how do we crack that nut?
Absolutely. So, I've come into Shelly's program now a year and a half. I have a very strong background in sustainable seafood. And we developed a model in sustainable seafood called a social marketing, or it's called community-based social marketing model. It is not social media. It is actually a behavior change strategy that looks at a very specific audience. So in this case, a wine consuming audience that is willing to pay for a wine in a certain bracket, because obviously that's where you want, where we have our logo. So a Conservation Champions logo is on a wine ranging from 50 Rand, I don't know what that is in dollars, but 50 Rand upwards of that. So the behavior program to get consumers on board now, it stands very firmly on this theoretical base known as a social marketing behavior change model. What it does is that it starts telling stories and selling stories. It is not, so you start then identifying with that logo as being a good citizen whose self-efficacy levels are really high because you're making a difference by choosing that bottle of wine. And that's what we've seen in South Africa worked really, really well around getting South Africans to make smart choices around sustainable seafood, or as we like to call it, a pro-environmental behavior shift. And it's this exact same model we're using with the consumer to start acting on that awareness. So through different levels of communication. So social media, we've written a substantial number of articles in wine-related magazines, in food-related magazines, and we're trying to pair the two, the pairing of seafood and wine. And we're also looking at working with bloggers and vloggers, so what we would call influencers that can help drive social norms. So those are the key levers that we're looking at, and we're working on those to try and get the message across. The understanding, Eric, is to get those early adopters that you would get in a crowd, and you convince them, and then they automatically help you kind of tip the scales with everybody else, predominantly by asking, is this wine sustainably produced? Looking for that logo. So those key little, what we would call behavior kind of nudges. I'm looking for a good wine, but I want to make sure that it has the Sugarbird logo and the IPW logo on it so that I can make a smart choice as a consumer. Where we're also putting a little bit of energy, as I mentioned earlier, is with retailers. And we're trying to get them to start recognizing the importance of supporting the wine farms that are putting all this energy in around their environmental stewardship. Retailers are being forced to look at their own environmental footprints as part of the SDGs, which is the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN. So they have to find means and mechanisms of transforming their own supply chains. And we're offering them a perfect opportunity when it comes to the wine. So there's these different levels to kind of get, but I have to caveat all of that with the fact that behavior is very complex and changing human behavior is complicated and it takes a long time. And we've just started, and we've seen some nice traction already. We've started with training both marketers. We're going to be hopefully training tourism agencies soon. We're going to be training wine tasters on the farms. The vision is to train, if not all sommeliers, so that they also then within their own systems start recognizing the logo. Kind of, it's already, becomes front of mind when they study. So going to the sommeliers academies, get the sustainability and the logos kind of within their curriculum. So the behavior program is kind of very multi-pronged to get to exactly what you're asking, where the consumer is actually asking and demanding that, which means you create that endorsement on the side of the winery.
Is Wines of South Africa, the marketing arm, are they helping you to get this word out?
Yes, there is a website that we put all our information on, and they do focus on international communication. But we are working more closely with them now as we're experimenting with different types of communication. So as Pav said, the Conservation Champion program that WWF works on is just a small section of the market. So just to be clear, 90% of the industry is using that seal on the neck of the bottle, and WOSA promotes that as well. But WWF is also critical in playing a role in communicating what the conservation champions are about. And we haven't always done that very well together. So from now on, we're really trying to use any opportunity to speak as one voice so that we minimize the confusion and we say, this is what South African wine farms are doing. 90% of the industry is certified to be environmentally safe and environmentally friendly. And then there's also this additional logo for the environmental leaders who are going well beyond that. And this is what it means. So WOSA, I speak with their country offices in each of the international markets, and we are working together to really try and get the message of unique South African stories. And I think that's what this lockdown and COVID has really pushed us. Traditionally, specifically in South Africa, but I know many other wine growing regions, they rely on visitors coming to the farm and purchasing wine and eating in a restaurant. And that's still a very important part of their business. And sadly, there's been a huge knock-on effect with that. But now that many things are virtual, I mean, we've seen in the last year, there's winemakers suddenly having to do Zoom tastings, virtual tastings. And I think there's huge innovation and opportunity in that, trying to get the international consumer to connect with where the wine is grown and what is beyond the wine bottle, Who are the people behind that, and what is the beautiful nature that is part of that farm? So the virtual aspect of communication is a great opportunity, but also I think what we're really trying to promote for the local market is just go to the farm and support them and understand that you can go mountain biking and you can do picnics with your family, and there is much more behind the bottle of wine than just what you think.
Yeah.
So
and I think, sorry, Eric, just to add to Shelly, the fact that, never let a good crisis go to waste is my kind of thinking, is that because we're moving to these virtual wine rooms and these virtual tastings, that is a perfect opportunity for us to actually now showcase the logos. Because it's an audience we would have never spoken to if we followed traditional ways of media, if we follow, and we can do it as WWF now, as opposed to relying on a third party or second or third, fourth down the line. We can hold a virtual tasting with one of our champions, and part of that virtual tasting can be, do you know about these logos, to an audience across the globe. Yeah. So there's definitely opportunities to scale, so that when you do come to South Africa and you visit the wine farms, you already know quite a bit about the two logos as well as the farm.
Indeed. So, Pavs, you were talking before about all the training that is taking place, and of course the marketing. This has got to cost an arm and a leg. How are you funding this?
Yes, it does cost an arm and a leg. It gives Shelly and I endless gray and nightmares because we're not reliant on the farms for that funding. We'd like them to invest in actually looking at their activities and their practices, and some farms have invested millions on their alien clearing and ensuring that the biodiversity is upheld. I mean, they've seen rewards, and I think I'd like to touch on some of the rewards they've seen in terms of actually amending their practices. So we've, at WWF, for what we're doing, we're actually sourcing funding from either public service partnerships or philanthropic funding, or from other sponsors. So whenever we can see an alignment between a funder and what we're doing, and very often it's a funder who enjoys wine, as our current funder is, they will support the program because they're both very keen on the environment, but they're also keen on wine. So, it's a good tie. We have, in the past, we have struggled to find funding for elements of the program. And I think that's just how it works. The consumer behavior work is very long. It's long term. It takes a while to show quick returns. So funders don't necessarily want to fund that. But I think what we're seeing with the benefits on the farms and the commitment from the farms, that's definitely helping us source funding to kind of fund the program, but as well as all of the activities. And I think what's nice is we've got a baseline now. We've done the market research. We've got wonderful baselines, and we can build on those baselines and show quick return on those baselines. And that's going to help us get a lot more funding for the program as a whole.
Perhaps I can also just add on some of the benefits. I think it's challenging to also try and market this to farms that are under an immense pressure, especially coming through these current economic and with climate change and the drought we've experienced. But if you can showcase those case studies, there's been farms where mountainous areas were filled with very thirsty trees, the alien invasive tree species that come from Australia, and now are choking up our rivers and capturing all the water. Because they invested in clearing those areas, those mountain streams have flowed through the most intense drought we've experienced in living memory. So surviving the drought and creating a more resilient business is really where the financial flows are felt at the farm. But it is up to us as WWF at this stage to raise the funds to make the program work. And we have a very small team and we're very passionate and we as efficient as possible. But and we also recognize that we won't be able to get 90% of our industry all as conservation champions. That's why we support that seal in the background. But we are really working with the leaders that can showcase what is possible with additional commitment and investment. So yes, we are looking for future funding, no doubt about that.
So if anyone on the show today knows of anyone, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But
so also, it's a challenge.
Yeah, and to Shelly's point, the farms are seeing the return in terms of farms that are having water during climate stress times, building resilient businesses, but they're also seeing the benefit of the biodiversity returns onto their farms. A lot of the farms, we've had fantastic stories about birds that have returned, the endangered Cape leopard that's returned because they've cleared away aliens. Shelly, remember which farm this is, but it has now discovered a yellowwood forest that it didn't realize was on the farm. And those are all now some of the biggest ecotourism points the farm can use to sell. And for WWF, we think it's brilliant because it's safeguarding and being stewards of those natural systems, which is what you want as a conservation agency. But for that wine farm and that winery, it's an opportunity to say, hey, come and look at our yellowwood forest. Come and, you come and watch our camera traps and you'll see the indigenous endangered Cape leopard cut across our vineyard, etc. Barn owls, all these amazing birds. And the birds have been the first to return to a lot of the farms where they've cleared aliens. So, it's silly to not want to do it because the benefits far outweigh, the negatives, the challenges. And your return on investment, if you market it right, and if you sell that ecotourism story, and you sell the story of what you're doing as a wine, it's a no-brainer as to whether you're benefiting or not.
Are you working with any of your other offices around the world to do something similar in those markets?
We have had interest from our South American offices, but no, to answer your question, not necessarily in a proactive way. But that doesn't mean we're not interested in expanding, as I said. Yeah. We welcome collaboration like that, and we think it's a wonderful opportunity for any of the wine growing regions to establish something like this. But as I said, there are existing and very credible certification schemes in many of the wine growing regions. but there might not be the same angle in terms of conservation and biodiversity conservation, and also expanding onto the market side of things. So there is enormous interest from the farms and from the market, from the retailers, to be associated with a brand like WWF as credentials to say, look, we are conserving our natural area at the same time as producing exceptional wine.
Yeah. It just seems like there's an opportunity to do that. But I think that, if we could say that there was a silver lining in the pandemic, and it has been that it's caused people to, like we said in the introduction, we're rethinking everything we do about business, every approach we take, the people, planet, profit, the triple bottom line, every aspect of how we run business now is being critically evaluated. And I think that maybe it sounds like, and Pavs, you were saying about how things have really been kicking off now during the pandemic. You're able to do more virtual things. You have all of a sudden a global distribution, which you had a harder time doing with traditional channels before. So maybe this pandemic has been able to give a nudge to your certification program and move it along. It's like the tailwind on an airplane, right? You got your destination an hour faster because of the tremendous tailwinds.
No, I mean, absolutely, Eric. I mean, I've been looking at it. So I work with Shelly, but I work in a few other areas around plastic and seafood. And the key things that's come out of this pandemic, working with businesses, is resilience and diversification. And I think that's what the pandemic, what our champions are realizing. They need the ecotourism component on the farms, because when our ports closed down and we couldn't export alcohol, and South Africa went to the extreme where we had those big bans on alcohol, I mean, that industry was so severely compromised, it was frightening. We had campaigns like Save SA Wines because we were so worried that was going to happen. And I think where the need lies, where the opportunities lies in building that resilience and diversifying what you're doing on the farms. And I think one of the key ways of doing that is by safeguarding stewardship of your natural environment, because they allow for that resilience, but they also create those ecotourism opportunities that allow for diversification of what you're doing. And I think that's ideally what you want to be able to also get the farms to recognize and then promote. So that when the borders do open and when tourism does flourish once again, they've all got all these, as I like to say, all these arrows in their quiver, as opposed to just being a good wine producer.
And then to add on to that, it's communicating about that. I think what's critical is that many of the farms didn't realize that their consumers are wanting to see, and it doesn't have to be perfectly edited. It can be a handheld video of what it looks like on the farm during harvest, or that, the cameras that are capturing the biodiversity. It's really an opportunity to tell your own story around what sustainability means for your brand and your farm. And that is so easy now with virtual communication. It doesn't replace the fact of kind of feeling it and smelling it and being on the farm, but it certainly means that the world is much smaller and you can connect with your consumer a lot easier. So we are really trying to push that as well. And that's certainly a silver lining to this virtual world the pandemic has put us in.
It also speaks very nicely to every consumer's feel good. Every consumer wants to feel good about their purchase. No matter what behavioral study you read, no matter what commodity it is, if you know that I'm purchasing this and I'm helping the environment, I'm helping a young kid, or I'm making a difference, that immediate feeling of self-efficacy sells the story. But the only way a consumer is going to know that is if the farm is told that story. And that's what we need them to do. We need them to, be able to get enough of that amplified messaging out that we're doing good, we're acting good, and our practices are good, so that when I go to wherever, either my wine show or if I go to a retailer and I look at that label and I go, hey, you know what? I'm making a difference by purchasing this particular bottle of wine. And that has tremendously more benefits than saying I'm donating or I'm starting a veggie garden, because consumers' bandwidth is very narrow. They don't usually invest lots of time in conscious thinking. But if they can do something unconsciously, like choose a wine, and they recognize that logo, immediately you'll see a reward on that.
Well, I imagine it would be nice to turn all of those consumers into ambassadors as well. So, the South African wine is on the kitchen counter and people are drinking the wine and cooking dinner and, what's this shiny label on the neck of the wine bottle? Oh, well, and they could tell the story for you, right?
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. We've been experimenting with that. It's an audience we didn't really realize were so influential. And it's particularly to certain markets. The millennials everything is social media focused. And so thanks to Pavs and her team, we've been experimenting with, mixed boxes of wine with fynbos bouquets and other nature-based products and delivering them to some people that, become ambassadors for the program. And their trickle effect, their influence is also touching different audiences than what our traditional communication might do. The more, the better.
I'd like to ask our audience to start thinking about some questions while I ask another question still. But if you would like to go ahead and put your questions into the chat window or the question window, whichever you prefer, we'll have a look at those and we'll get to those questions shortly. So what you put together is pretty complex, and there's a lot of moving parts. There's the funding element. There's there's domestic versus international. There's marketing. There's product development. There's a lot going on, and I imagine there were probably some pretty significant challenges. And one I would say is probably adoption from some of the wineries. What would you say some of the biggest challenges were in terms of getting this program prepared and launched in South Africa?
Well, we started small, Eric. So I think that was a good thing, and always in partnership with the expertise of the wine industry, and really trying to be kind of a stepwise approach. So not being the golden standard straight up front, but developing from basic principles and then improving upon that. So I think that's quite important. As sometimes when you develop a local standard or a scheme, you can be influenced by what is best practice internationally, but then that's not really driving the change on the ground, on the local context. So I think that helped in terms of making sure there was effective communication and training to roll out the implementation. Mm-hmm. But also it is a voluntary scheme. We've never wanted to move into the space where it's enforced and it's mandatory and you have to do it. We want to work with the willing, and those environmental leaders are coming to us as much as we are. There are some farms that we really do want to work with because of their biodiversity value, and so we do knock on some doors. But through the years, we've been amazed with the value that these farms do see in either it's the technical advice that we offer them to help them develop environmental management plans that their market is asking for. Or it is also, to create an incentive to provide some funding support to do the work that they're doing. And now there's the added benefit of market differentiation and the consumer story. So telling that sustainability story to the consumer. And so I think those challenges will be there. We don't want to grow enormously. That's why the partnership with the IPW Sustainability Seal is so important. They create that credibility at an industry scale, and we support the biodiversity conservation leaders. But I think we do need to be realistic and realize that, as an environmental AGO, we can't continually fund a program like this. We'd like to support the actions that are trying to drive that environmental conservation. But eventually we'd love to get to a point where it's financially viable, where a portion of the wine sales come back into conservation projects, or consumers pay more and recognize the seal and will pay 10 cents more per bottle of wine. And we first need to build awareness and get the brand out there, and then test the viability of a model like that. Yeah.
I think one of our biggest challenges has been consumers understanding, and this is so interesting, sustainability and wine. Because South Africans, and from our market research, don't the information is so divided. Some people associate sustainability with organic and confuse it. Some people associate that all wine has to be sustainably produced because it's right outside my front door. I can see a wine farm and there's mountains behind it, so it must be sustainable. There's a lot of myth busting that we've had to do around sustainability in wine. That has been one of our biggest communication challenges as well. And then the whole idea that if it's sustainable and sulfur free are the same thing, and kind of break those kind of very set, quite interestingly, very set mind frames. And then the whole idea, which I spoke to earlier, I am loyal to this wine because I really like it and I like the taste and I will support this wine estate. Not necessarily putting sustainability quite high up on your rungs of when you choose a bottle of wine. So that has definitely been a challenge for us as well. So just trying to get through all of that clutter that people have in their minds around what is organic, what is sustainable, what is IPW logo, what is the Conservation Champion logo. And I think that's where we're getting there. It's taking us a long time and we're trying to get to that level. That's why we're using all these other mechanisms like the retailers and the sommeliers, etc., to try and help them, get them to help us amplify our messaging, just so that the understanding of what sustainability in wine production actually really means and what you're actually supporting by purchasing this particular bottle of wine. I mean, we've even had silly questions from people in the industry. So I'm not singling out the consumer. We've even had like the sommeliers that didn't understand around sustainability in wine, and they've been trained in this area, and that's something that I think Shelly and I will definitely put more effort in, is how do we get the whole program and its understanding and its working and its mechanisms into sommelier academics, into cookery schools, into chefs training, where it's actually something that they talk about. It's a conversation they have with the right information and the accurate information around, if I'm going to be a chef that's going to recommend a wine or a pairing, if I'm going to be a sommelier, I need to know what the sustainability of this product that I'm pushing is, as well as the good taste, because we've never doubted the quality of South African wines. They're delicious. What we are challenging people on is how was that bottle of wine produced and what impact did it have on the environment? Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of our biggest challenges that we still have to overcome as well.
This is so interesting. I have one more question I'd like to ask before we take the questions in the chat. What advice would you give to wineries in other countries that might not be as far along in their sustainability programming? And this, I ask this because a lot of times things start with just a seed. And I'm one of those people. I'm an early adopter, right? So if I was cultivating a vineyard somewhere, I would be the grape farmer that would be out there pounding my drum that we need to do this, and everyone else would be looking at me like, no, we need to just do our business, save money, not adopt new crazy marketing things. There's 1,000 certifications in the market anyway. Don't confuse us, Eric. Go away. This is more to distract us, right? So imagine that you are a winery in Chile or Argentina or in British Columbia or Quebec, Canada, right? Nova Scotia, Canada, all these places, Slovakia, places that are perhaps not as well known for their wines. I mean, of course, Chile and Argentina are, but some of those other winery areas where people, some of the winemakers really want to make an impact, but the rest of the industry hasn't quite gotten it yet. What advice would you give them?
I'll start off. Perhaps you can tail in. I think just start somewhere, I mean, let your passion drive you and be proactive about it. Don't wait for industry or the critical mass to get something going. I think tell your story, tell your commitments. I mean, as we were saying, that's what you can do in your own capacity is communicate on your websites and communicate through your networks. And then in the background alongside that, try and get neighbors around you to adopt your principles, and then collectively that really is a louder voice than individually. And then also reach out. We welcome hearing from any regions that are wanting to explore something like this, and to potentially set up some kind of partnership like this as well. So I think just start somewhere, be proactive, and don't wait for for the critical mass, because I think the innovators and the early adopters are those that really always are trying to make us do things better. And so we need that.
Yeah. I mean, from our experience, it's been collaborate, and keep knocking at that door until it opens. Yeah. Because I think when you got 1, 2, or even 5 farms that are telling their story, their sustainability story, or even just entering into their journey and going, how do I do this? What is the right way? Can you help me? I need a little bit of a guide. Immediately that already starts building that impetus and that momentum to move towards that. I mean, ideally, you want that tipping point to happen, and then you're going to take everybody with you. But get to that tipping point, it's baby steps.
And also, sorry, I was going to say, to build your chain of support. So maybe you're that one winemaker who has the vision, and maybe it takes you a year or 3 years to find another winemaker that shares your vision, and then that's 2 of you, and then that 2 become 4 and 8 and so on. So it may take a while. I mean, living in Spain right now, they do not embrace change here, right? Things are happening super, super slow. But if you go to somewhere like I see we have people on the session today from Oregon, from Chile, and from Italy. Okay, so, and having lived in Oregon, I can say Oregon's very forward-looking. You know, they're probably thinking about how they can collaborate with you right now, whereas Spain wouldn't want to talk to you for another 10 years.
That's people's,
absolutely.
Yeah, people's aversion to change. Nobody likes change. Yeah, you need to get that one early adopter to start asking the right questions. The other thing is, we have a model that works. It's not like you're going to be alone, the only salmon swimming upstream. Kind of look to South Africa, see what we've managed to do here with our 45 farms. Look at, and I can imagine the challenges are going to be very similar. You know, the obstacles are going to be very similar, and there's lessons to be learned from what we've done as WWF South Africa with our champions. And also, I mean, having met the champions and chatted to them, Shelly, at our marketing meetings, you realize that they're open to share their stories. I think they would welcome a person from Oregon or Chile or Spain saying, we're thinking along the same lines. Well, what were the challenges you faced? What is the investment like? Whether that is human capital or financial? And how do we go about this? And where were your successes? How quick did you see any successes happening? So those are, you've got a set model, you've got a go-to point, which is actually really better for you than trying to start this all on your own.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would ask any of the people from those countries who want to get in touch with you, by all means, please, you can contact us here at the association, or Shelly and Pavs, if you would like to put your contact information in the chat and let people contact you directly, we can go that route also. But yeah, and I think also in our new online community that we're launching just in a couple of weeks, I think we'll probably have a group to discuss wine issues. We already have a sustainability group, but I think we need a wine group in there as well, because wine is such an important part of the food and beverage tourism experience. And there are so many unique things. But like you said, just because you're in South Africa doesn't mean you have such vastly different issues from Australia or New Zealand. Or what about the wineries in Thailand? Okay, well, maybe they use elephants and not anywhere else in the world does, right? But so that's a pretty unique need in Thailand, right? That's a very different situation. But I mean, we can all learn from each other, and if we can help each other get to the finish line, maybe a decade or two sooner. I mean, like I said, Spain, things are really traditional here in Spain. But imagine where the Spanish wineries could be if they put tradition aside and talked to the South Africans, right, or the people from Oregon or the people from New Zealand, and said, "Hey, what are you guys doing? Help us modernize." Yeah. I think that would be a very interesting world to live in.
I agree. And I think, look, it is a very competitive space. That shelf space in the markets is still, prime positions. But I think we've moved beyond that competitiveness now, and we have to, because pandemics and climate change are global issues, and we can't keep our shared learning in isolation. So certainly from our perspective, we would love expanding this kind of work and encourage partner organizations or wine regions to try something like this, because now's the time, really. I mean, sustainability messaging is everywhere, but it's critical to try and get the meaning behind that and to make sure that has credibility as well.
Well, we have a hot lead for you in the chat. Terry Jolie, a woman that I know from my time living in Oregon, she's a tour guide for Great Oregon Wine Tours, and she says that Oregon doesn't have this kind of certification yet. And Oregon is a very forward-thinking wine industry. So I would be happy to connect you, or you should reach out to Terry, speak with her. And then I know a couple other people that I could put you in touch with in Oregon. It makes good sense. It's all about who you know. And if we can get, South Africa, then Oregon, then I know people in Australia too. And then all of a sudden I'm building that chain with you.
Absolutely. Right? Yeah.
Okay.
It is all about who you know and connections. So
indeed.
Let's see where we go.
I have to tell you, I was listening when you talking about. Hopefully, nobody from Spain is online, but the Spanish are wanting to change.
No, I checked first.
But we mustn't forget that legacy in the wine industry is a big deal.
Yeah.
Leaving a legacy. I mean, South African wine industries have been in families for generations and generations. So I can assume it's the same in Spain. And, if you want to leave that legacy, if you want to create that longevity with something that is a family tradition, it's a no-brainer not to start embracing sustainability, because you're not going to be able to ensure that legacy if you don't start. We've got too many things coming at us, whether that be climate, whether that be pandemics, whether that just generally being changing economic environments. We've seen it in South Africa. Our economy is up and down like a toilet seat, more down than up, So any disruptor that faces this industry, if you're not looking towards sustainability, if you're not looking towards stewardship of the environment on which you farm, you are going to hit more serious hurdles in the future, and you might actually end up not having that industry. Yeah. Which is, and I know the Spanish are very focused on legacy and history and where where it comes from, etc. So
they are.
It's definitely a selling point here.
They are, and they do have a very rich history, and let's just respect that for a moment. I was making a little bit of fun, and perhaps that was inappropriate, but I think one of the areas where Spain's wine industry leads is in architecture. They have some fascinating, beautiful wineries from some world-renowned and Spanish-renowned architects, and that in and of itself drives a great reason for people to visit those wineries. And I know Italy has some interesting winery architecture as well. But when you start looking at some of the other wineries around the world, I mean, the only other place I would say that's got some fascinating architecture is Napa Sonoma. I'm not remembering any fascinating architectural wineries in Washington, Oregon, Chile, Australia, New Zealand. So maybe some nice buildings, but nothing that's dramatic. And Spain has some of those really dramatic wineries. So good for you, Spain. Spain leads in that one. Okay, last question before we wrap up. Someone was asking about where to get a list of these South African wines that have this certification. Do they go to the WOSA website, or what can they do?
You can go to our WWF website, and I'll also share a short list with the audience. There's also an app that we've developed called the Champion Wine Farm Guide. It's developed for local tourists to see what they can do on these 45 farms. So trying to promote kind of mountain biking, picnicking, restaurants, accommodation. But it's a very easy virtual way of seeing which are the farms listed. And equally, if you go onto wwf.org.za and you look for our Conservation Champions program, you'll see the 45 farms listed there and some of their environmental credentials as well, and some beautiful imagery.
Okay, super.
Yeah. And I just see a colleague of ours has put the link.
Thank you, Angela.
Thank you, Angela. Yeah. And I mean, we also have an Instagram account called Follow the Sugar Bird. We'd love for everybody to start following it, because that we're using that to kind of tell those stories you mentioned, Eric, to get that information out around the farms and what they're doing. And we bring in a whole lot of issues around wine production and climate. We've done stuff on the taste of summer and the ecotourism. we're looking at the people behind the wine production is one of the themes, to understand exactly, it's not just the front of house people, but it's everybody else that helps contribute to the sustainability journey. So, follow the Instagram account as well. There's some really nice gems in there and some storytelling as well there.
Just getting the URL for people. There's the actual link that you can, and I'm going to follow you right now.
Great.
Done. Oh, and thank you for posting about the webinar on there.
Absolutely.
That was very nice of you. Thank you. See, didn't even know you were doing that. Thank you. Guys, we need to wrap up, but this was really interesting, and I am going to follow up with you after this because I think this conversation has just started. And I think there's a lot more that I'd like to know personally, but I think that there's some ways that we could perhaps work together in helping to get your message out there. Sustainability is a big part of what we do. It's within the goals of our association as well, and we're also part of the UN's global travel plastic whatever thing that they do to minimize plastic in the travel industry. We're part of that. We support that. We're a signatory. So we're looking at this from every possible angle. This is also why we embraced sustainability as the theme of our Food Trucks Global Summit next month. It's really an important topic, and you can't talk about food and beverage tourism unless you do talk about things like waste, fair income for all, respect for coworkers. It's all related. The world is changing, and it's a very timely topic. So thank you both for staying beyond working hours today. We appreciate that, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric, and the listeners.
And for the opportunity.
Let's stay in touch. Absolutely.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.